My name is Elise. I'm 32 years old. And tonight, I walked into the house I wasn't supposed to see again. It's strange how familiar the scent of polished wood and stale wine can be, like memory caught in amber. Nothing's changed. Not the heavy velvet drapes, or the antique piano in the corner no one ever played, or even the faint crack in the hallway tile, the one I tripped on when I was 15, right before everything shattered. Tonight is my cousin Ava's engagement party. White orchids, string quartet, smiles stretched too tight. It's the kind of gathering where everyone sips champagne and pretends nothing bad ever happens. Especially not to girls like me, the ones they sent away. I step into the room, and it's like time hiccups. Conversations pause, just briefly. A few heads tilt. Someone whispers, "They weren't expecting me." That's the thing about secrets. They echo, even when no one speaks them aloud. Ava spots me from across the room, her hand frozen on her fiancé's arm. She recovers fast, she always did, and glides toward me with the kind of practiced warmth you learn in finishing school, or from watching your mother tear a girl down with a smile. "Elise," she breathes, brushing air against my cheek. "You made it." "I did," I say. Would have been rude to miss family. There's a flicker, maybe confusion, maybe something colder. My Aunt Celeste walks up next. Red dress, high pearls, judgment pouring off her like perfume. "We didn't know you were back in town." "Just for a little while," I say, passing through. That's what they all assumed I'd do the last time, after they packed my bags and told me the boarding school had an open spot. Never mind it was across the country. Never mind I hadn't done anything wrong. Not anything worth exile. But we don't talk about that. Not here. Not yet. The party hums on. Glasses clink. Laughter drips like syrup. I walk past a tray of macarons and stop by the mirror in the hallway. I barely recognise the woman looking back. My hair's darker now, my voice quieter. But my eyes still remember. I was 17 the last time I stood in this house. There was yelling, papers thrown, tears I didn't understand. And then silence. That cold, final silence of people who've decided you're a problem, best removed. They didn't send me away out of concern. They sent me away to erase me. "Make yourself at home," Ava's fiancé says politely. "Liam. I think his name is too nice for this family, too unsuspecting." I offer a small nod. "Thanks. I used to live here, you know." He blinks. "Really? Before I became the family embarrassment." There's a beat of stunned silence. Then I smile and move toward the garden. The fountain still trickles like it did that night. The one when I overheard them talking. Celeste, Ava, my father. They didn't know I was on the stairs. They didn't know I heard everything. That's when I learned the truth. About the deal. About the inheritance. About why my name needed to disappear. But that's not for tonight. Tonight is just a reminder. A whisper I'm still here. They sent me away thinking I'd vanish. Start over. Forget. But some roots go too deep. Some ghosts don't stay buried. And I didn't come back empty-handed. There's something in my coat pocket. Slim. Encased in black plastic. A small drive with names, dates, documents, insurance. Because if they've forgotten who I am, I'm about to remind them. Not with drama, not with fire, but with silence. With truth so loud, they won't be able to look away. A waiter offers me a glass of wine. I take it. Sip, slowly. The night is only beginning. They don't know what I know. Not yet, but they will. I stood by the rose trellis, hidden in the fringe of shadows cast by the lanterns. The air was cool, the kind that wrapped itself around your arms like memory. Inside, the laughter swelled again, softer now, more tentative, like they were pretending not to notice me lingering. That's always been their way. Ignore what doesn't fit their image. It used to work. It used to tear me up inside, the way they could look through me, past me, like I didn't exist. But not anymore. Ava's laugh floats through the open doors. It's pitch perfect, delicate, sweetened for the crowd. I wonder if she still uses it when she lies. She used to, back when we were girls and shared everything. Until she started hiding things. Until I found out what she'd done. What they'd all done. I finish my wine and wander the edge of the garden, heels pressing softly into the gravel path. My fingertips graze the stone railing near the old gazebo. That's where my mother told me fairy tales when I was little, the only softness I ever had in this house. She died when I was 13. A heart attack, they said. Sudden, shocking, too soon. I never fully believed them. Not after what I found in her journals, not after the things she wrote, warnings hidden between recipes and pressed flowers. She'd known about the money, about the manipulation, about the deal struck behind my father's closed office doors. And now, I knew too. The flash drive in my pocket felt heavier with each passing second, like it carried the weight of every lie they'd ever told. Elise. I turn. Ava stands in the doorway, silhouetted in gold light, a champagne flute dangling delicately from her fingers. She tilts her head, all concern and poise. I didn't know you were coming, she says again, like repetition might smooth over the tension. I wanted to surprise you, I say. Isn't that what family does? Her smile tightens. You look different. I am. We fall into silence. The kind that isn't comfortable but practiced, like we both remember how to play this game, even after all these years. She steps down into the garden, and I notice she's still wearing the bracelet. The one I gave her the summer before everything changed. I wonder if she even remembers. You really came all this way, just to see me, she asks. No, I say, softly. I came to remember who I was. Before all of this. She flinches, just barely. But I catch it. Elise, she begins, but I raise a hand. Don't, I say. Not unless it's the truth. She stares at me, and in her silence, I see it, the smallest crack in the veneer. Regret, guilt, or fear. I take a step closer, not threatening, just steady. Do you remember the letter? I ask her. Her eyes widen slightly. She doesn't answer. The one you slipped into my suitcase. Before they drove me to the airport, you said you didn't want me to go, that it wasn't fair, that you'd fix it. Still, she says nothing. I held on to that letter like it was oxygen. I read it every night for a month. Then, one day, I realised you never meant it. Elise, I waited. I continue. I waited for you to speak up, to tell the truth. But you didn't. You joined them. Ava swallows. Her voice is barely a whisper. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. I say, you chose comfort. I chose silence. Until now. Behind her, music drifts into the night. A cello hums low, laughter again. Someone calls her name. She doesn't move. I lean in, voice like glass. You should tell them I'm here. Her eyes flash. Why? What are you planning? I don't answer. I just smile, soft, knowing, unshaken. Then I walk past her, back into the house. The air is thicker inside. Perfume, politics, too many smiles. I move through the guests like a memory returned. Familiar faces blink at me. Some nod. Some look away. And then I see him, my father, standing by the fireplace, surrounded by men in suits and women with too tight eyes, laughing, performing, pretending I was never real. He doesn't see me yet. Good. I want him to feel it. That creeping sense. That shift in the air when something returns. Not to beg. Not to explain. But to claim. I drift toward the gallery hallway. The portraits still hang there. Generations of white-collared men and stone-faced wives. A lineage of polished deception. At the end of the corridor, the study door is shut. I try the handle. Unlocked. Of course. Inside. It smells like cedar and secrets. The same heavy desk. The same globe. The same drawer with the false bottom where he used to hide things. I kneel, careful, methodical. Fingers find the mechanism. Click. Lift. It's still there. The leather folder. I open it and slip the contents into my purse. Scanned copies already live in 4 separate encrypted backups. This is just for show. For sentiment. The door creaks behind me. Elise. My father's voice. Flat. Measured. Cold. I don't turn around. You're not welcome here, he says. I rise slowly. Turn. Funny. I say. You never were good at welcome. Only removal. His face doesn't move. But his eyes flicker. He sees the folder. I let him. I step past him without another word. Let him wonder. Let them all wonder. Because I haven't said anything yet. But I will. Soon. The silence followed me down the hallway like a second shadow. Behind me, I could still feel my father's stare. Rigid, unreadable, but colder than I remembered. That used to scare me. Now, it only confirms what I already know they're afraid. Not of what I'll say, but that I've stopped needing their permission to say it. I re-entered the ballroom. All golden chandeliers and gentle string music, like a scene frozen in a more beautiful lie. My heels clicked against the polished floor as I crossed back into the sea of guests. They parted slightly, subtly, like a ripple where I passed. Some looked at me too long, others not at all. I was the scandal no one dared name, the ghost they thought had stayed dead. Darling, came a voice, too smooth, too sharp. My stepmother, Claudia. She kissed the air near my cheek and clutched my hands like we hadn't once stood in the same room, while she whispered that I was a stain, that I was lucky they were sending me away and not somewhere worse. I must say, this is a surprise, she said with that rehearsed warmth, and such a bold dress choice. Red. To Ava's engagement, I smiled. Red's the colour of warning. Isn't it? She blinked. Just once. But I saw it. Still so dramatic, she said, letting go of my hand. Some things never change. Some things. I echoed. Change more than you expect. She opened her mouth to say something more, but her husband, my father, appeared beside her. His presence was always silent but heavy, like pressure behind the eyes. Elise, he said. Nothing more. Not a greeting. Not a question. Just my name. A warning in itself. I looked between them, the picture of power. For so long, I thought I wanted to be like them. Clean. Controlled. Untouchable. But they were never clean. Just practiced. And now the dirt was rising. I clutched my purse tighter. Inside, the flash drive pulsed like a heartbeat. Everything I needed was on it: bank transfers, forged signatures, property deeds moved in silence, all connected to the foundation my mother had started in her will. The foundation I was meant to inherit. Until, mysteriously, I didn't. Until I acted out. and they decided I needed structure, distance, a chance to grow, until the money disappeared and the trust was dissolved, replaced by a shell company that funneled it all right back to them. I wondered if Claudia knew I'd traced every document, every date, down to the false medical reports they used to declare my mother's final months as incompetent. I was 16. I knew something felt wrong, but I was too young, too scared, too loyal. Not anymore. Elise, Claudia said again, slower this time. Why don't we speak privately? I met her gaze, then my father's. There's no need. Everything I have to say, I'll say where everyone can hear it. A flicker of tension. She glanced around. Now's not the time. Oh, I think it is. The pianist paused. The air shifted. People turned, just slightly, the way people do when they sense a story beginning. But I didn't speak again. Not yet. I walked past them to the centre of the room, raised my glass, tapped it gently with the stem of a fork. The chime rang out, delicate and final. Ava turned, her fiancé beside her. I just want to make a quick toast, I said, my voice clear but soft. Everyone stilled. I saw my Aunt Celeste stiffen. My cousin Reed froze mid-bite. The air tightened like a held breath. To Ava and Liam, I began, may your life together be built on trust, on honesty, on knowing the whole story before you say, I do. A ripple of nervous laughter. And to family, I continued, the kind that raises you to believe in love, and the kind that teaches you how easily it can be used as a weapon. Now there was silence. Real silence. No music. No glasses clinking. Just the weight of words no one expected. I looked at my father, at Claudia, at Ava. I was 17 when I was sent away. I was told it was for my own good, that I needed discipline. But what I really needed was a lawyer. Ava's face paled. Claudia's glass nearly slipped in her hand. I know what you did, I said quietly, no longer addressing anyone in particular. And I'm not here to fight or argue. I'm just here to let you know. The truth's coming, whether you want it or not. I raised my glass. To freedom, I said, and then I drank. Let them wonder what I meant. Let them sweat. The best revenge isn't cruelty, it's clarity. I left the ballroom before anyone could stop me. Let them sit in the aftershock, in that breathless space where doubt seeps in and suspicion blooms. I didn't need applause. I didn't need confrontation. I just needed them to start unravelling. I stepped out into the quiet hallway, my heels echoing against marble. My chest ached, not with fear, not even with satisfaction, but with the strange calm that follows the moment you finally stop running. Outside, the night had deepened. The garden lights glowed softly now, like dying embers. I walked the path behind the estate, toward the greenhouse. No one ever came here anymore. Not since my mother died. The scent hit me before I reached the door. Rosemary soil, the faint sweetness of jasmine. It wrapped around me like her voice used to. She loved this place. She said things grew here that couldn't survive inside those cold, glittering walls. And maybe she meant me. I stepped inside and closed the door gently behind me. The glass panes were fogged with heat and memory. I sat on the old stone bench where she used to read to me. Before bedtime. Before betrayal. Before the house turned against me. I pulled the flash drive from my purse and turned it over in my hand. It didn't look like much, just a sliver of plastic and metal, but inside were files with names, signatures, and scans they thought they'd buried. I remembered the night I found them. I had been staying in a rented studio in Portland, barely scraping by, working at a bookstore by day and taking night classes in estate law. Not because I wanted to, but because something inside me needed to understand how it all happened. How they took everything. My mother's foundation had been more than money. It was her legacy, a scholarship for girls who had no one. She built it in my name. She told me it was mine. But the week after her funeral, my father told me I had no claim to it, that the paperwork had changed, that it was too complicated. I didn't know then how many lies were sealed with notaries and lawyers and silence. But I do now. I traced it all, with the help of a friend who owed me a favour, a records clerk who didn't ask questions, and a long-forgotten email chain buried in the inbox of one of my mother's former advisors. The documents didn't just prove that the foundation had been stolen. They proved how. They proved that Claudia had suggested declaring my mother unfit during her last months, citing emotional instability that could void her will. That my father had followed through with a backdoor petition in probate court. That Ava had signed as a witness. I didn't cry when I read those signatures. I didn't scream. I just sat there, in the dim light of my apartment, and let it hollow me out. And then I started scanning. Tonight was never about vengeance. It was about recognition. I had stayed silent because I didn't know who I was without them. But now I did. I was not the girl they discarded, not the problem they sent away. I was my mother's daughter, and I had her voice now. A sound startled me, a footstep on gravel. I turned. Ava stood at the threshold of the greenhouse, her arms folded tight across her chest. "You could have just called," she said softly. "I did," I replied, 3 years ago. "You never answered. I was scared. Of me, of what it meant, of what I helped do." We were quiet for a moment. The kind of silence only sisters can sit in. "I didn't know they'd go that far," she said. I thought they'd just restructure things. I thought it was temporary." "It never is," I said. "Not when money's involved." She looked at the flash drive in my hand. "What are you going to do with it?" "I haven't decided." "Are you going to destroy us?" I met her eyes. They were glassy now, rimmed in guilt. "No," I said. "You already did that yourselves." She didn't flinch. She just nodded, slow and defeated. "I loved you, Elise," she whispered. "I still do. I loved you too." I said, "But I don't trust you anymore." Ava turned to go. "Ava," I called. She paused. "I'm not here to burn the house down," I said, "but I will open all the windows." She didn't speak. She just walked away, and I sat there, alone in the greenhouse, under the shadows of things that still tried to bloom. Tomorrow would be the beginning. Tonight was the quiet before. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in the guest room, the same one they used to lock when I was young, as if it belonged to ghosts. The bed was too stiff, the air too clean. Everything smelled like someone else's memory. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the stillness. It wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that follows after an explosion. Too perfect, too unnatural, like everyone in the house was holding their breath. I wondered what my father had done after I left the study. Did he open the folder? Did he call his lawyer? Claudia probably texted half the guest list. Ava. I didn't know. I couldn't feel her anymore. She used to be my echo, my shadow. But now she was something else entirely. By morning, the house felt colder. The help avoided my eyes. Breakfast was already set when I came downstairs, but no one was there. Just silver trays and butter knives, napkins folded with militant precision. I didn't eat. I walked out the front door and into the misty garden again. I needed air, but more than that, I needed clarity. I hadn't told them everything last night, not even close. They thought the flash drive was all I had. It wasn't. The real secret wasn't in the documents. It wasn't the stolen inheritance or the forged signatures. It wasn't even about the foundation. It was about blood. 2 years ago, I found a letter tucked inside one of my mother's old recipe books, the one with the pear tart she always made on my birthday. The paper was thin and yellowed, written in her graceful script. She never intended anyone to find it. Maybe not even me. In it, she admitted what none of them knew, what she never had the courage to say aloud, that I wasn't my father's biological daughter, that the man who raised me, who exiled me, who stripped me of everything, wasn't even mine to grieve. She'd fallen in love with someone else before her marriage, briefly, madly, secretly, and she became pregnant with me. Her family forced the marriage with my father, forced the lie. She went along with it to protect me. But that love, that one real thing in her life, never faded. He was gone before I was born. She never said his name, but she left behind a photo. Just one. A man in a naval uniform, smiling, young, proud, and next to him, in faint pencil, her words, Elise's father. I stared at that picture for hours the day I found it, because suddenly everything made sense. Why my father treated me like I was a borrowed object. Why he could love Ava like a daughter and look through me like mist. I wasn't his, not in blood, not in name. And now, neither was what he'd stolen from me. I walked to the far edge of the estate grounds, where the trees grew wild and unpruned, where no one looked. I sat beneath the same maple tree where my mother used to sit and write in her journal, when she thought no one was watching. The sun was breaking through the fog now, gold spilling over branches. It was quiet. I pulled out my phone and tapped a message. Just one. Upload. Full report plus evidence folder to the firm. Final lock code, Jasmine74. I didn't hit send. Not yet. But the draft sat there, waiting, like a coiled promise. This wasn't about revenge. It was about identity. I needed them to know the truth wasn't just uncomfortable. It was irreversible. A twig snapped behind me. Reed, my cousin, always watching, always lurking. You're really back for good. Huh, he asked, his hands deep in his coat pockets. That depends. On what? On whether the truth survives this house. He gave a dry laugh. You always were too poetic for your own good. I didn't smile. He sighed. Look, I don't know everything. I didn't want to know. But I remember. I remember that day they sent you away. No one said anything. It was just done. Like you never mattered. I said nothing. Reed looked at me, eyes shaded by whatever guilt he'd buried. What are you planning to do? Nothing, I said. I'm just letting the story finish itself. That's dangerous. Only for people who lied in the first chapter. He opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded, slow. Before he left, he said, Be careful. They're more desperate than you think. And I believed him. Because people like them, when they lose control, don't just get scared. They get reckless. By midday, the house felt like it was holding its breath. I stayed outside as long as I could, avoiding the eyes behind curtains, the sudden silences when I passed too close. Everyone inside was pretending things were still normal, that I was just a ghost floating through their perfect little narrative. But cracks had already begun to form, and I knew exactly where to press. At noon, I drove into town. No note, no announcement. Let them wonder where I was going. Let them stew in their unease. I parked in front of the courthouse. Pale stone, cold glass. The same building where they dissolved my mother's will and sealed her fate behind legalese and technicalities. Inside, the woman at the records desk looked up at me. Middle-aged, kind eyes, tired smile. I called yesterday. I said, Elise Merrick. Yes, I remember. You said you were looking for sealed probate documents, she said. Yes, related to Celeste Merrick's estate from 2009. She gave a cautious nod. That case. It was sealed under an emergency petition. Normally, only the executor or direct heir can request access. I met her eyes and said quietly, I am the direct heir. I just wasn't allowed to know it. A long pause. Then, with a slow motion of her hand, she pushed a clipboard toward me. Sign here. 10 minutes later, I sat at a wooden table in a private reading room. A thick manila envelope lay before me, stamped confidential in faded red. I opened it. The first thing I saw was a letter from my father's lawyer, petitioning the court to declare my mother mentally unfit to handle her estate. The second was a signed psychiatric evaluation, dated only 3 weeks before her death. It wasn't real. I recognised the doctor's name. I'd tracked him last year. He'd lost his licence, falsifying records. My mother never stood a chance. They stole her voice before the cancer even took her body. There it was, black and white, all of it. The methodical dismantling of a woman who once gave everything to protect me. But this time, I wasn't going to protect them. I took photos of every page. Quiet, careful, steady. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. By the time I walked back out into the sunlight, I had everything I needed. Evidence, motive, witnesses. The truth wasn't just on my side. It was mine to wield. I didn't go back to the house right away. I stopped at a small cafe I used to visit as a teenager. I remembered the cracked leather booths, the old jukebox, the way I used to hide in the back with my journal, trying to write myself into a world where I wasn't disposable. I sat in the corner, ordered a coffee, and opened my laptop. I pulled up the drive, scanned through the documents, the correspondence, the timelines I'd built over the last year. Then I created a folder labelled "and inside." I uploaded every photo from the courthouse, one copy to my cloud backup, another sent to a lawyer friend in Chicago, a third, anonymously, to a journalist I trusted. It wasn't about exposure, not yet. It was about pressure. I was tightening the noose, slowly, elegantly, the kind of silence that suffocates. By the time I returned to the estate, the sun had started to dip. Long shadows spilled across the marble floor. The front door was already open. Ava stood just inside, pacing. She froze when she saw me. "They know," she whispered. Claudia found the empty folder in the study. "She's panicking. Father hasn't said anything, but he looks like he hasn't slept." "Good," I said, brushing past her. "Elise, please. What's your end game?" I turned to her. "There's no game. I just want the truth to be louder than their lies." She looked shaken. "They'll come after you. You know that. Right. They already did. 18 years ago. Behind her." Claudia appeared at the top of the stairs. She didn't look afraid anymore. She looked furious. "Elise," she called, "we need to talk." I smiled faintly. "We really don't. You've made your point." "No," I cut in. "You made your point the day you signed my mother's name to something she never agreed to. The day you helped erase me." She descended the stairs slowly, one hand on the rail, all elegance and steel. "You don't know everything," she said. "I know enough, and so do the people I've shared it with." That stopped her. "What do you mean?" I stepped closer, quiet and even. "It's not just in my pocket anymore. It's in 5 inboxes. 1 lawyer, 2 journalists, 1 foundation board member, 1 judge." Her face drained of colour. "Even if something happens to me," I added, "the truth keeps walking." No one said anything for a long moment. Then I turned, walked past them both, and up the stairs to my room. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. I sat on the edge of the bed in that too pristine guest room, watching the light from the window shift into something softer, duskier. Evening was settling over the estate like a blanket, trying to hush everything that had been stirred up. But the silence wasn't comforting now. It was the silence of people afraid to speak first. A knock sounded at the door. Gentle, almost reluctant. I didn't answer. Another pause. Then a voice. "Elise, it's Reed." I considered ignoring him, but something in his tone made me stand. When I opened the door, he looked like he'd aged since this morning. Not in his face. Still smooth, still smug, but in his posture. Like the weight of knowing was finally sitting on his shoulders. "I need to show you something," he said. I followed him down the hall without speaking. Past portraits of dead men who never looked like me, down the corridor lined with dusty books and untouched liquor carts. He led me into my father's private office, the real one. Not the study guests saw, but the back room with the safe built into the floor. It was open. Reed motioned to the desk. On it lay a pile of papers, some folders, and a faded manila envelope with my name written across it in my father's handwriting. Not Elise, Lissy. No one had called me that since I was 9. He stepped back, gave me space. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a photograph. Me, as a baby, curled against my mother's chest. Behind her, blurred and distant, was him, the man from the Navy photo, the one my mother had never named. There was more. A letter, dated nearly 15 years ago. My father's handwriting again, sharper this time, almost angry in its restraint. Celeste lied. I know now she knew all along. Claudia, too. The will wasn't supposed to be changed. She fought me. I let them convince me she was confused. I didn't want to believe it, not because I loved her, but because it was easier to think she was sick than to admit what we did. I never wanted to raise you. That's the truth. But you weren't the problem. I was. By the time I understood what she gave up for you, it was too late. I read it twice. Then a third time. It didn't undo anything. But it cracked something. I found that last year, Reed said quietly. I didn't know what to do with it. He never spoke about it. Just left it there. Why show me now? Because last night you didn't flinch. You didn't yell. You just stood there. And I realized they can't touch you anymore. But maybe you could still reach me. I turned to him. I'm not here to save anyone. Reed, I know, he said, but you deserve to know he knew, that he felt it, even if it was too late. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. This doesn't fix what they did, I said. No. Reed agreed. But it makes it real. I looked around the room, the bookshelves, the globe, the drawer where I once found my mother's perfume hidden, as if he couldn't quite throw her away. Do you think he ever loved her? I asked. I don't think he knew how. When I left the office, I didn't feel lighter. I didn't feel heavier either. Just clearer. Some truths don't set you free. They just stop you from chasing lies. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching fog gather in the garden. I imagined my mother walking through it, her scarf trailing behind, her eyes bright with fire. She fought for me in silence. I would fight in clarity. At midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from Ava. I need to talk. Please. No tricks. Just the truth. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back the greenhouse. 15 minutes. Alone. If she showed up, maybe there was still a thread to pull. Not forgiveness, but understanding. And if she didn't, I'd know she chose silence. Again. The greenhouse was quiet when I arrived, dimly lit from the moonlight slipping through the glass roof, still warm with the memory of sun. The air smelled of earth and jasmine, soft and lingering, like my mother had just stepped out a moment ago. I waited near the bench. 12 minutes. Then 13. Then the door creaked open. Ava stepped inside. Alone. She didn't speak at first. Just stood there, looking at the plants, the shadows, the place we used to sneak into when we were girls, hiding from piano lessons and parental expectations. I didn't think you'd come. I said. She walked slowly toward me. I wasn't sure if I should. You had a choice, I said. I always did, she whispered. I made the wrong ones. I didn't answer. I wanted her to speak. Not rehearsed, not polished. I wanted truth. I was scared. She said, not of you, of them, of what would happen if I stood up. When they told me about the will, they said your mum had lost it, that she was delusional, that if I told anyone, I'd be cut off too. Her voice cracked, and I believed them. Or maybe I wanted to. She sat on the bench across from me, hands twisted in her lap. I still have the bracelet, she said suddenly. The one you gave me when we were 15, with the little moon charm. I never took it off. That didn't stop you from signing the petition. She flinched. I know. Silence stretched between us. You weren't powerless, I said. You were just silent. I thought that if I didn't fight them, I could still protect you in some way, from the inside. But they were too fast, too careful. By the time I realised what they were doing, they'd already buried the paperwork. They'd already erased you. You let them, I said, my voice steady. You watched them take everything and called it protection. Ava blinked back tears. I didn't think you'd ever come back. I thought you'd vanish, and we could pretend none of it happened. That maybe that was kinder. It wasn't. She nodded slowly. I know that now. We sat in silence. The jasmine rustled in the warm air, brushing against the glass. I felt her eyes on me. I've seen what's on the drive, she said. Reed showed me. And the court documents, the false medical reports. Do you understand what that means? I do. They'll deny it, I said. They'll bury it again if they can. Ava looked up. Not this time. I'll testify. I'll give a statement. If this goes to court, I'll say everything I know. I studied her face. Not for signs of lying, but for signs of fear. There was fear, yes, but also something else. Resolve. You're too late for forgiveness, I said. She nodded. I'm not asking for it. Just a chance to do something right. I didn't tell her yes. I didn't say no either. I simply rose from the bench and opened the greenhouse door. Ava followed. Outside. The air was colder. The stars above us were blurred by low clouds. The estate looked smaller somehow. Less invincible. We walked in silence. Back to the house. Back to whatever would come next. At the back steps. I paused. I'm leaving tomorrow, I said. Ava turned to me. Where will you go? I haven't decided yet. She hesitated. Then, will you come back? I might, I said, but not like this. Next time I come back, I won't be knocking. She swallowed hard. I'm not afraid of them anymore. She said, You should be, I replied. But now you know what they're really afraid of. What? The truth. Spoken out loud. She nodded once, then disappeared inside, leaving the door open behind her. I stood there for a moment, hand in my coat pocket, fingers brushing the edge of the flash drive one last time. Tomorrow, I'd send everything, but tonight, I would let the truth breathe, let it stretch its legs, let it haunt the halls, not with rage, but with the quiet certainty of a storm that no one could outrun. I woke before dawn, not because I couldn't sleep, but because my body had grown used to waking in moments like this, in the hush before decisions get made, before the world catches up to what you already know. The house was still asleep. No footsteps, no whispers, just the faint hum of electricity running through the walls, keeping up appearances. I dressed slowly, black sweater, dark jeans, nothing to impress, just to move. By the time the sun cracked over the horizon, pale and half-hearted, I had packed my bag and slipped the flash drive into a small envelope. I left a second copy on the bed, next to a short note addressed to read, If anything happens to me, this goes to the press. The password is the name of the boat Mum took me on when I was 6. You'll remember, I didn't trust anyone completely, but Reed had shown me enough to earn one thread of the rope. Downstairs, the kitchen lights were on. To my surprise, my father was there. He sat at the long dining table, still dressed from the night before, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand. His tie loosened, his face unreadable. He didn't look at me when I entered, just spoke, low and rough. You were always too much like her. I stayed quiet. She never let things go, never bent to what made sense. She chose the right thing over the smart thing. Every damn time. She chose me, I said. He looked up at me now, eyes bloodshot, but clear. I didn't send you away because I hated you, he said. I sent you away because I couldn't look at you without remembering the man she loved. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I raised you. He went on. I gave you my name, my roof, and you still weren't mine. No, I said quietly, but I still deserved the truth. A beat passed, then another. You really going to take this public, he asked. I'm not taking anything. I said, I'm just not hiding it anymore. He stared into his drink, swirling it slowly. You've already ruined this family. No, I said. You did. I'm just turning on the light. Silence. Thick. Heavy. Then, I underestimated you. A bitter smile touched my lips. You didn't see me at all. I left him there, alone with his drink, his legacy, outside. The sky was turning blue-grey, the kind of light that makes everything look colder than it is. I drove into town again. This time, not to the courthouse, but to the old office where my mother had once registered her foundation. I handed the flash drive to the administrator at the desk. a woman in a plum cardigan, who greeted me with polite confusion until I told her my name. Elise Merrick. I said, "My mother was Celeste. She founded this place, and I have something you need to see." She led me into a private room. I plugged in the drive, opened the folder marked Restoration, scanned documents, board signatures, audio recordings, even photos. One of Claudia's lawyers signing a transfer of assets, time-stamped during my mother's final hospital stay. The woman didn't speak as she watched. When the last file finished playing, she sat back in her chair, stunned. "This is a disaster," she murmured. "It'll take weeks to verify all of this, but it's real," I said. "You'll find matching documents in the state archives. And if you don't, I have backup copies." She nodded slowly. "And you're not going to the press, not unless they try to bury it again." She studied me for a long moment, then extended her hand. "Welcome back. Elise." I shook it. It wasn't a victory. Not yet. But it was the first time in years someone looked at me and saw me. Not the scandal, not the stain. Afterward, I stepped out into the street, blinking into the sun. My phone buzzed. A message from Ava. He knows about the letter. He's demanding to see it. Reed says he's spiralling. I think he's afraid. For the first time ever. He's actually afraid. I typed back. He should be. He taught us what fear felt like. I tucked my phone away. No more running. No more waiting. This was what truth looked like. Not explosive. Not cinematic. Just steady. Just irreversible. By the time I returned to the estate that evening, the mood had changed. The staff no longer looked me in the eye. Claudia's car was gone. Ava's door was closed. My father's study light was on. But the door remained shut, like a bunker holding back a war. Reed met me on the stairs. I read the letter. He said, I didn't ask how he got it. I'd left it on purpose. In the envelope, on the desk. I knew curiosity would get the better of him. And it's devastating, he said, but also oddly human. To hear him admit it, to hear him say he didn't love you because he couldn't face himself. He didn't say he didn't love me, I corrected gently. He said he didn't want to. There's a difference. Reed nodded. What now? I've submitted the documents to the foundation board. They're investigating, quietly, for now. Do they know what you want? I looked at him. I want the foundation restored, under my name, as it was meant to be. No more board manipulation, no more offshore transfers. And I want the record corrected. My mother's mental state, the forged documents, the smear campaign. And after that, I want silence. I said, not the kind they forced on me. The kind that comes when justice is done and there's nothing more to say. Reed exhaled, a slow release of guilt. I'm with you, you know. I know. I said, now. He stepped aside, and I climbed the last few stairs to my room. That night, there was no drama, no shouting, just stillness. Like the house knew it had been seen for what it truly was. Not a home, but a vault of secrets, cracked open at last. I lay in bed, thought about my mother, about her hands in the soil, her voice soft as wind, telling me I was made of stronger stuff than they'd ever understand. And I believed her now, because I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't slammed doors. I'd simply come back and remembered who I was. In the morning, a letter was slipped beneath my door. No envelope, just a folded page with a short message in my father's hand. You win. I hope it was worth the ruin. I read it once, then I tore it in half, then in half again, not out of anger, but because it didn't matter anymore. This wasn't a game. It never was. This was survival. Later, I walked the grounds one final time, past that most fountain, the green house, the gazebo where my mother once read to me. I let the wind move through my hair, carrying the scent of rosemary and stone, and when I reached the gate, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. They would remember this. Not because I screamed, but because I arrived. Because I stood in the home that rejected me and didn't ask for a place at the table. I built my own. And now, they would sit with the silence, with the truth, and I would walk away whole. I didn't drive far that morning, just enough to put distance between me and the estate's long shadow. The sky was a pale silver, like it hadn't made up its mind about the weather. I pulled off the highway and found myself parked beside a quiet overlook, a wide stretch of valley below, wrapped in morning mist. I turned off the engine. For the first time in days, maybe years, I breathed, deep, slow, full. The weight hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted. It wasn't pressing on my chest anymore, just resting behind me, like a mountain I'd finally climbed. The radio buzzed softly as I scrolled through my inbox. One new message. From the Foundation's board director. We've reviewed the materials. We'll be scheduling an emergency vote to reinstate the Foundation under your direction. You'll be notified within 72 hours. Also, thank you for protecting what your mother built. Few people would have had the strength to do it the way you did. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I didn't believe it, but because it was the first real acknowledgement. Not a half-truth, not an apology wrapped in excuses. Just recognition. I thought of my mother again. How hard she'd worked to make something lasting. Something pure. And how easily they tried to corrupt it. But it lived on, not because of them, because of me. I opened my laptop and reviewed the backup folders again. Everything still intact, protected, replicated, archived. It wasn't about insurance anymore. It was about closure. I clicked delete on the final copy in my possession. The rest belonged to the future. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Ava. He left, packed a bag and didn't say where he was going. Just disappeared. No name was needed. I stared at the message, unsure what I felt. Not triumph, just confirmation. My father didn't know how to lose. He only knew how to leave. But this time, I hadn't chased him. I simply let the door close. Don't follow him. I replied, if he wants exile, let him taste it. What do I do now? She wrote. I hesitated, then typed, do the thing you didn't do before. Stay, face it, speak. She didn't reply, but she saw the message. That was enough. I drove through town before sunset, past the bookstore I once worked in, the bus station where I cried in the rain the night they sent me away, past the hill where I once sat with Reed and asked if he thought we'd ever be more than what they made us. I passed it all like scenery in someone else's life, until I reached the cemetery. The gate was rusted but open. I walked slowly, the crunch of gravel beneath my boots, sharp in the stillness. The wind carried the faint scent of pine and stone. Her grave was simple, just her name, her dates, and the words she grew where they thought nothing could. I knelt down. I did it, Mom. I whispered, not the loud way, not the cruel way, just the way you would have done it. The wind moved again, lifting my hair from my face like fingers brushing gently through it. I know why you stayed quiet, I said. Why you chose your battle so carefully. But I also know this. Silence isn't love, and love isn't silence. A tear slid down my cheek. Not of pain, just release. I wish you told me. I said, about him, about me, but I understand why you didn't. You were trying to protect the part of yourself that lived in me. I laid a small folded photo beside the headstone, the one of her holding me, with him smiling in the background. I didn't need it anymore. I'm going now, I said softly. Not to run, just to live. I stood. The valley stretched wide and golden below, the trees swaying in quiet rhythm. Behind me lay the wreckage of a false life. Ahead of me, the beginnings of something honest. Maybe even peaceful. I rented a small cabin just outside a coastal town, the kind with sea air that stings your lungs and mornings that arrive wrapped in fog. No one knew me here. No one expected anything. And for the first time in my adult life, I didn't have to perform. No pity, no shame, no pretense. Just me. The cabin was modest. A single room with wood-panelled walls. A fireplace that crackled even when unprovoked. And windows that looked out to endless grey water. I unpacked slowly, placing what little I'd kept on open shelves, not to hide, but to breathe. I didn't bring much. Just a framed photo of my mother, the original, not the copy I left at her grave. A thumb drive with only one file, a letter I'd written but never sent, and a notebook, half full of the things I'd been too afraid to say out loud. I didn't know how long I'd stay. That wasn't the point. There was no script now. No demands. No obligation to stay one step ahead of people who wanted me gone. It was quiet, but not empty. A few days passed, long walks by the water, coffee in chipped mugs, dreams I could finally remember, because they weren't nightmares anymore. On the 5th day, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten, thick paper, no return address. I knew the handwriting immediately. My father's. I didn't open it right away. I left it on the windowsill, unopened for hours, until the light shifted and curiosity outweighed caution. The envelope tore softly in my hands. Inside, the letter was short, just 5 lines. Elise, I won't ask for forgiveness. I know better. But if you're reading this, it means I did one thing right. You made something they couldn't break. I was never strong enough to protect it, but you were. There was no signature, just space. I folded the letter, not sure what to feel. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't closure. But maybe it was the closest thing he was capable of giving. And somehow, that was enough. Not because it fixed anything, but because it no longer had the power to hurt me. I tossed another log into the fireplace. The flames danced higher, and I sat there, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like cedar and salt, letting the heat press gently into my bones. Later that week, the foundation board called. The vote had passed unanimously. The name had been restored. The accounts reopened. My mother's mission was alive again, this time under my care. They offered an office, a team, a ceremonial title. I declined the office, but I accepted the rest. I wasn't ready to return to the city. Not yet. But I would write. I would guide. I would shape the future of what she started, from wherever I was. They didn't need me in a building. They needed me at the helm. It was strange, how quickly the tides could turn, not with force, but with quiet persistence. That's how I won, not with revenge, with return, not with fire. with truth. One evening, as the wind howled against the windows and waves pounded the cliffs below, I pulled out the notebook I had once filled with unsent letters. I tore out the final page, and for the first time, I wrote to myself, Elise, you made it. Not because you were unbroken, but because you refused to stay broken. They told you silence was survival, and for a while, it was, but truth became your voice, and voice became your power. Don't forget what you've learned. You are not what they tried to erase. You are what remained, and that is enough. I folded the page, slid it between the cover and the spine, and I knew then. I didn't need to tell the story again. It had already been told, and now it could rest. So could I. Weeks passed. The cabin became a kind of sanctuary, not a retreat, not an escape, but a quiet reckoning with myself. The kind of peace that doesn't arrive with fanfare, but with the soft thud of putting down a burden you've carried for far too long. I kept to myself. I checked in with the foundation every few days. Progress reports, grant approvals, outreach proposals. The work was steady, purposeful. It grounded me in something larger than pain, something my mother would have been proud of. Her name was on the letterhead again, and mine, right beneath it. One morning, a package arrived. No return label, no note. Inside a small black velvet box. I opened it slowly. A necklace. Simple. Gold. The pendant, a crescent moon. I stared at it for a long time. The charm matched the bracelet I gave Ava all those years ago, the one she never took off. I knew who sent it. No need for words. I placed the pendant on the windowsill, beside my mother's photo. A quiet offering, maybe a beginning, maybe an ending. It didn't need a label. Some things just are. On the day the story broke, the full story, I was alone, sitting on a weather-worn bench overlooking the sea. The wind was high, the water violent and stunning. My phone buzzed once. A news alert. I opened it without hesitation. The headline was simple. Local heiress reclaims stolen legacy. Investigation into Merrick family. Estate begins. Below it photos. One of me, speaking softly into a microphone at the Foundation's virtual relaunch event. Another of my mother, from years ago, smiling in front of a group of scholarship recipients. The article was long, thorough. The kind of journalism that doesn't seek scandal, but truth. It detailed the forged medical evaluations, the silent transfer of funds, the manipulation of court records. It mentioned names, not cruelly, but clearly. Claudia, Celeste, even my father. And then it mentioned the reversal, the investigation, the reinstatement of the Foundation under my care. They quoted me. Sometimes justice doesn't come with noise. Sometimes it comes with stillness, with choosing not to look away. I read that sentence 3 times, not because I needed to believe it, because I finally did. The fallout was swift. Ava texted me the next day. They're gone. Claudia flew to France. Dad's bank accounts are frozen. The estate is under audit. It's happening faster than we ever thought. I replied only, it was never about speed. It was about weight. She didn't press further. I think she finally understood. There were no phone calls. No pleas. No threats. Just silence. The kind of silence that happens when people realise the fortress they built was always glass. 2 days later, Reed called. His voice was steadier than I expected. They're going to drag your name through the mud, he said. I've already seen some of the headlines brewing. I know, I said, "But they'll fail." He added, "I know that too." He was quiet a moment. Then, "You okay? I'm not broken." I said, "That's enough for now." He laughed softly. "I hope you write about this someday." "Maybe I will," I said, "but not for them. For me." That night, I stood at the edge of the bluff, letting the wind pull at my sleeves. Below, the sea surged, uncaring, eternal. I closed my eyes. For the first time, there was nothing I needed to say, nothing I needed to prove. I had faced the house that erased me. I had told the truth they buried, and I had walked away not with victory, but with myself, still standing, still whole. I returned to the city on a rainy Tuesday. No one knew. No headlines. No photos. Just me, walking through grey sidewalks and cab splashes, with a quiet kind of freedom I had never known before. The buildings looked different now. Not towering, not menacing, just structures, just scenery. I passed the cafe where I used to cry into cheap tea, scribbling in notebooks no one read. I passed the bookstore that once paid my rent and gave me just enough purpose to survive. And then I passed the firm, the law office that took my mother's estate and carved it into silence. It wasn't rage that made me stop. It was curiosity. I stared up at the tall glass doors, wondered if the same receptionist still sat at the desk, wondered if the partners ever talked about the Merrick case in hushed tones when they thought no one was listening. I didn't go inside. There was nothing left to reclaim there. Some ghosts don't deserve exorcism, just absence. I turned the corner and headed toward the courthouse. Not for vengeance. Not even for closure. For record correction. Inside, I submitted a final packet, notarized, verified, sealed, restoring my mother's original will to the public archive. No more secrets. No more technical errors. Just her words, in her voice, preserved as they should have been all along. When the clerk handed me a stamped receipt, I felt something shift, not in the air, in me. I had become the guardian of a legacy, but I had also become my own witness. Later that week, I gave a quiet interview. No stage, no camera crew, just a reporter with a notepad and tired eyes. She asked gentle questions. What kept you going? I answered honestly, knowing I wasn't the only one they erased, just the one who came back. Why now? Because I stopped being afraid of being loud. She nodded. What do you want people to take away from this? I paused. That silence isn't the same as peace, I said. And sometimes, the strongest thing a woman can do is tell the truth no one wants to hear. She wrote it down. Then she smiled. Not pity, not admiration, recognition. Ava called the night the article came out. Her voice was fragile, like she didn't know if she was allowed to call. I read it. She said, I waited. I don't know if I'm proud of you, she added, or just grateful you didn't destroy us completely. That's not what this was, I said. I know. But still, you could have burned the whole thing down. I didn't come back for revenge. I believe that now. Silence hummed between us. Then she said something I never expected. Do you ever miss the version of us that didn't happen? Yes, I said softly. All the time. We didn't say goodbye. There was nothing polite left between us. But there was something. Not forgiveness. Not even trust. Just truth. And sometimes that's enough to build on, or at least stop the bleeding. The foundation began awarding grants again. Schools reopened partnerships. My inbox filled with letters from girls who had benefited from my mother's work. not because she was wealthy, but because she had believed in second chances. I read every letter. Some made me cry. Others made me feel seen in ways I never expected. And one came from a girl in the same boarding school I'd been exiled to. She wrote, "I don't know you, but I think I understand you. They said I was too much, too loud, too difficult. But I read what you did, and I thought, maybe I'm not broken. Maybe they are." I folded that letter and placed it inside my mother's recipe book, the one where I found the truth, buried beneath flour stains and ink smudges. We were all trying to survive in silence once, but now someone else had found her voice too. The final thread came quietly. No final confrontation, no courtroom showdown, no cameras waiting at the courthouse steps, just a certified letter in the mail. A notification the Merrick estate had officially changed hands. Claudia was gone. My father's assets, frozen, audited, dismantled. The properties dissolved. The shell companies shut down. The foundation was no longer connected to the family trust. It stood on its own now, under my name, not as inheritance, but as reclamation. I stood in the post office parking lot, letter in hand, as the autumn wind swirled around me. Leaves lifted and danced like small truths on the air, too stubborn to be ignored anymore. And I smiled, not with triumph, but with peace. I had always thought resolution would be loud, emotional, cinematic. Instead, it came in the form of stillness, a quiet home, a quiet legacy, a quiet self. There was no one left to fight, not because I had destroyed them, but because I had walked past them, let them live with what they did. That was always the difference. They silenced to control. I spoke to be free. That weekend, I returned to the cabin, just for a while. I lit a fire and curled up beside it with my mother's journal. I hadn't opened it in months. I didn't need to anymore. But I still did, like opening a window into the kindest part of my memory. One page, toward the back, caught my eye. She had written, "One day she'll understand why I stayed quiet. But even more, I hope she'll be the one to break that silence. And I hope she'll do it with grace, not rage. That would mean she survived it." I traced the ink with my finger. I had survived, not unscarred, but whole. There's not much more to tell. The foundation grew, slowly, honestly. The board met quarterly. We funded new programs, created scholarships under her name, and opened 2 resource centres for young women navigating displacement and family estrangement. I visited sometimes, not as a symbol, not as a story, just as Elise. No title, no performance, just presence. Ava still sends letters, once a month. She doesn't ask for forgiveness anymore, just connection. We're not sisters the way we once dreamed, but we're not strangers either. We're aware of each other now. And that's something. Reed moved to Oregon. He sends photos, mountains, forests, the occasional awkward selfie with his dog. He never talks about the house. Neither do I. It's gone now, anyway. Sold quietly to a private developer. They say it'll be turned into a wellness retreat. Ironic, isn't it? That a place once built on silence and performance will now be sold as serenity. Let them repaint the walls. Burn sage in the corners. Plant lavender by the fountain. The ghosts don't live there anymore. They live in stories. And mine is no longer a tragedy. It's a testament to survival, to truth, to becoming. I tell it only once, in a whisper, but it echoes, because someone somewhere, needed to hear it. And now they have.